That's great. I think we have everybody here. Okay, so John has given us a lot of food for thought. And I think it's very interesting that already in some of your predictions, we see some of these elements happening at their embryonic stage, maybe, at the moment, in some of the amazing pieces of work we have seen as part of projects that this forum has covered, but also ideas that come forward. So I think I would like to take these predictions and identify a few areas for potential discussion. But before we do that, I would invite all the panelists to maybe introduce themselves and give their name and their affiliation. So if we start with you.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Theodoros. I'm a clinician, I'm a pulmonary physician, and also the head of the Greek network of EURAPCO.
Good evening, I'm Dasy, Papathanasopoulou.
If you give us 1 second, we'll get a microphone somewhere. So that everybody can hear you. Okay. Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So maybe if we start again, so everybody can hear.
Good evening, and thank you for this invitation also. I'm Dasy Papathanasopoulou. I'm sociologist and national coordinator of Hellenic Healthy Cities Network, as also chair of the advisory committee of WHO for the national networks in Europe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Bergstrom. I'm Director General of EFPIA, which represents the research-based pharmaceutical industry operating in Europe. So this will be the SFEE at the European level.
You've heard from me already, I think.
Thank you. My name is Petra Wilson. I'm the person whose name you won't find in your programme because I'm a late replacement. I'm replacing Katie, who was speaking on behalf of the Cancer Association. I will also be speaking from a patient's perspective, and until recently I was the Chief Executive of the International Diabetes Federation, so I'm likely to make a comment about diabetes, but I don't know yet.
Good evening, I'm George Veliotis. I'm a medical doctor and I head up the Life and Health Division of Inter-American, which is an insurance company belonging to a Dutch group called Achmer, and today I also represent EURAPCO, the health group of EURAPCO, which is a pan-European mutual platform in 20 countries.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pascal Apostolidis. I'm the president of the SFEE, the Association of Greek Pharmaceutical Companies, and also the GM of AbbVie Pharmaceuticals. I'm happy to join this panel and looking forward for a fruitful discussion.
Hi, my name is Bamidis. I'm an associate professor at the medical school at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, dealing with active and healthy aging and silver science in general, and I'm also the president of the Hellenic Society of Biomedical Engineering.
Okay, so maybe if we pass the microphone bidirectionally this way, we can discuss a few interesting questions I have prepared for you. Actually, I will be inspired by John's presentation. And as John made 7 predictions, I would like to ask each of you if you could give your prediction for the future. Actually, what is in your view, or what are in your view, or one major trend in care system innovation in the next 10 years, like John did?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not going to be as sort of nicely presented as John did. But anyhow, I have kept a few notes while John was presenting. Some were just afterthoughts from what was shown, some were predictions that perhaps some things can be complementary. So I like the hype cycle that you showed about technology, and when something appears, we have an excitement, and then we have a disillusionment, and then again we have the envisioning and the promising technology being applied. One of the things that perhaps could be relevant in the future is that what we missed from some of these predictions perhaps is that there will be also health education applications, in the sense that we also have learning and massive open online courses, not only for health professionals, but also for patients, for practitioners, for health, for care providers themselves. And this also is going to have the same hype cycle. These technologies have good promises, but then it turns out that some of them cannot be as learning effective as possibly. And I guess that in the future we're going to have some transformations in this respect, like transformations in the curricula of universities, or transformations in the way that we prepare lifelong learning activities for the public or for practitioners. Another thing perhaps is that we will probably be able to use, or we should be able to use technology in a more ecologically valid way, so that we transform diagnosis, treatment and follow-up. I mean, rather than just doing examinations and monitoring of specific clinical procedures at home or at workplace or wherever, like the quantified self thing, perhaps we can use some of these metrics in a more sensible way. Like Plato, for instance, used to say that you can find out what happens with somebody's health if you ask him to play for an hour, rather than just clinically examine him for an hour. So perhaps some of these gadgets can allow us to predict the diagnosis, or to follow treatments and follow-up measurements in a more sort of ecologically valid way. Also, we can see that healthcare will be based at home, as you said. And I like the example John used for the Muse system, like we should be able to do, for example, apply cognitive services, cognitive training ourselves, perhaps neurofeedback as a kind of not only diagnostic way, but also treating and intervention way. And the same thing will be that perhaps some of these services can lead our doctors or our clinicians to have a proper decisions per se as well. Also, you mentioned this as well, John, the IoT and the way that the data could be more publicly available, like open data, and perhaps these will also be coming from both individual sources and also public authorities. I mean, our municipalities or our public services will enable the openness of these data that we collect in a proper way, of course, and perhaps anonymized or whatever. That will enable what I can call public business intelligence. In that way, governments will care for the economic value of all these services, empowered by all the analytics engines and the amenities that we have, but they can create more transparable, for instance, transparent open budgets in countries, open healthcare budgets, so that there will be less corruption perhaps in the healthcare domain as well. And then that can drive policies and strategies which will not be based as usual as nowadays, but will be perhaps infographics-based policies and driven policies, or facilitated by interoperable services and devices. And that can also lead into less errors, and perhaps the decision support systems that we have will be trained to avoid errors like in the thinking fast, thinking slow mode that you mentioned. And that can also perhaps in the future lead us in a way to have more political incentives. So we'll have perhaps more politicians being addicted or tended to use technologies in that way, but perhaps we'll have less money to do so.
Great, thank you.
John Crawford has put interesting dilemmas in front of us. I think we with the analogy that you put in 1899, that everything that can be invented has been invented, I don't think we are this disillusioned. We are in a better position nowadays to say that we have the technology and we know that the limitations of the chip, how much we can reduce the chip and the information we can put in the chip, is more now the question of affordability. And possibilities are almost endless. We can invite you in 10 years and do this presentation again to see where we are. But what can we afford? Because us from the pharmaceutical industry, you already mentioned, John, that you are also from the IT perspective, you are working in terms of eHealth and mHealth. And if the pharmaceutical industry is not awakened to work with you, we might see you invading into our turf with new medicines, new technology that will be a missed opportunity if we can not start working with you and see what we can develop that the governments can afford. Because technology has endless limitations, but we can also have to work on something that's affordable. So I'll concentrate on that. Another area that you mentioned, I think we need to work on us from the pharmaceutical industry, not on mergers and acquisitions, which is the modus operandi nowadays, the big company buying the small company, but also exploring the possibilities of big data and the endless info that we can take out of these data banks that can provide to the pharmaceutical industry, because we have, for instance, I heard the other day that LSE is working with a hospital in China, and they have access to a data bank of 5 million patients, out of which 1 million are high-risk cardiovascular risk patients. That this data, the lessons we can learn from this data and the molecules that we can put in place will be a different ball game, for the years to come, versus the past, where we had the efficacy of the best pharmaceutical was 50 to 60%. Now we're entering to pharmaceuticals with where efficacy is approaching 90%, and with personalized medicine or more targeted molecules, we can even exceed that. We have now medicines that they can cure. An example is Hep C. Cancers also, that we have minimal residual disease, meaning that that cancer is basically in a dormant stage. So all this technology could really alter the spectrum of where we operate, and it will be interesting to answer these questions in 10 years' time. So that's my prediction, and I'll pass on the microphone.
So I think both of you give an interesting message. We need to be bold, that we need to be open-minded in the way we look at innovation, but also pragmatic. And I think this is the important element that John, you also brought forward, that even on the technological cycle, we need to start thinking of other elements. So e-health solutions are not technical, they are socio-technical. And they are about the patient, they are about the services, but also they are about the other stakeholders, the industry, the innovators that bring these services forward.
Thank you. Also to thank the organisers for the invitation and to commend John on an excellent presentation. I think he gave a very good overview. These changes are inevitable, they're happening, they're going to accelerate, and they will have an impact on all stakeholders. As insurers, of course, we faced many times with the bull, and it's a big challenge for us because in most countries, medical inflation exceeds general inflation in the order of 3 to 5%. And second only to private tuition fees, it's one of the most, let's say, rampant cost inflator in terms of goods and services. The other point is, I agree fully with the statement that technology is an enabler. It always will be, in my opinion, human and patient-centered, supported and enabled by technology. The fact of the matter is that the health industry is at the crossroads where we're seeing the convergence of the digital, the physical and the biological space coming together. And these three things don't always lead to lower costs. We've seen a lot of new technology and devices and pharmaceuticals that have come to the fore and increasingly coming to the fore, whereas in traditional IT terms, more technology, the per unit cost goes down. In healthcare, that's not always the case. And we heard also, the introduction of new drugs for example, of hepatitis C. The costs associated with that are enormous. And those create a lot of political, social challenges from a funding point of view. To the point of your, I think, very good overview of how health, let's say the population health spectrum, if you look at it from an insurer's point of view, about 56% of the population is healthy. It consumes 18% of expenditure. 34% is well, but at risk of some chronic diseases, consumes 41% of expenditure. In other words, approximately 60% of health expenditure covers about 80% of the population. And 40% of expenditure actually covers less than 10% of the population. And I think the issue of primary prevention is extremely important. I think mHealth, mobile health, is certainly an enabler to empower individuals to take more control of their well-being. Our experience though has been with a few, let's say, cases which are out of the ordinary, getting the stickiness of individuals to hang on to that technology is a challenge. I think on the other hand, though, if you move into the chronic disease areas, I think there, in my opinion, not so much the wearables, but what I call the therables, I think they will move the needle a lot more because people there already are afflicted by chronic disease. They have every interest to look after their disease and to, let's say, influence the outcome. So I see a big role in technology and patient empowerment with remote technology, specifically on the chronic disease side. And I also see a very big role on the case management side with patients with a lot of comorbidity and in the home healthcare environment, specifically for the aged population afflicted with dementia and Alzheimer's. Thank you.
I think, George, what you are bringing is also the perspective of efficiency of delivery of healthcare. If we look at the UK example, a lot of things are pushed to the acute care, although we have a very strong primary care system. And it is about that efficiency and this type of technologies where we try to manage things away from acute. We empower the patient as a citizen, not only at the time where they are treated as a patient, but at the time they are citizens and they need to preserve good well-being and good health. And I think the financial burden of healthcare systems needs to move away from the traditional examples we have at the moment. And this is a big challenge. So, Petra.
Thank you. John, you made me think of so many things. I'm trying to organise my thoughts, and every time I think I've got them pinned down, they morph into something else. The thing that really struck me about your 7 predictions is that I think every single one of them has questions, what do we mean by the individual? Who is the individual now? Your first prediction about the role of the individual in population health is one side of it. We now see the individual and the power of the individual in helping us shape the health of a whole population. Thank you. And then you talked also about each of us being a creator of our own health or our own wellness. We're all already creators of our own illness. Are we creators of our own health as well? And for me, that was sort of the other side of the individuality. And then you drew our attention also to the fact that with an aging population, we're having to rely on robots, on devices, on remote services, because we don't have the same concept of individual in the family as we used to have. And it's just been going around in my head that every single one of your predictions has some key aspect in it about us understanding the concept of individuality and individualism differently. And that makes me think that I think one of the most important things about making a success of your predictions, and I love every single one of them, and I hope that they will become successful, but a lot of that for me depends on how can we really understand the individual in this time, and are our old concepts of the individual still good enough for us to actually make use of these technologies? And I'm very struck by the fact that, and because I was asked to speak from the perspective of patients' associations, when one is a patient, one is suddenly less an individual than before, or feels how alone one is if one doesn't have family around. And I think this is one of the issues that we really need to master. We need to look at how we can use technology to support people when they are on their own, to bring people together, to create new communities so that we can use big data population to change population health. And I think one of the things that I missed, I know you know it, but I don't think you said it, so I would say it, is that I think within all of these big data issues, whether we're talking about big data for driving population health or big data of our own that we generate by wearing a headband that tells us what our thought patterns are like, within all of those, what we're actually isolating is our place as an individual within a bigger context. And I don't think we can understand individual unless we understand context. And I think we really need to remember that, because it's context that makes us make decisions. I know I shouldn't eat too much sugar. I know I should exercise. But I'm in a context now. I'm away from home. I'm in an environment where my food is supplied. I'm in an environment where I'd have to try quite hard to exercise. So the context is limiting what I know I ought to do. We can use the technology to enhance the context so that even when the context is working against me as an individual, I can still continue to make the right decisions. But thank you very much for your predictions. I hope they come true.
Thank you, Petra. I think the individual, as a citizen, as a patient, is essential. And I will come back to the concept of patient-centric, citizen-centric approach to care in a question later on. Rich?
Yes, no, I hope we can get back to that. And in fact, I think there's a lot of helpful conversations now about health systems and prevention systems being people-centered as opposed to patient-centered, to make the point that we're all patients one day, So, John, you were able to renew yourself. I've listened to you many times, but I always get amazed with the way you flavor your presentations. So thoughtful, okay? So indeed, I mean, there's been talk here about the convergence of the sciences. There was a seminal report by MIT was it 10 years ago, or maybe not more than 6-7 years ago, predicting exactly this, which we see now. On the one hand, you have technology, whether it's sensors, apps, computers, on gadgets, physical things, okay? Really, it's moving very quickly, okay? Then you have data capabilities, whether it's sequencing or high throughput screening in the chemistry labs, or whether it's big data analytics. It's amazing now, these petabytes, zettabytes, whatever, the data capacity, okay? So that's moving, okay? And then we have in the classical biology, which I'll come back to in a second, more traditional biopharmaceuticals, pharma companies, medtech companies, you have that part, And then you have material sciences, which I prefer to call it as opposed to nano, because nano sounds scary and strange for some of the NGOs, It's really about material sciences. which takes you into, new devices, 3D printing, it's about nanoelectronics and so on. So all these things are converging. And there's a real challenge here, which we can discuss later, for all the different sectors to try and, work together, because we have to deliver on the science. Okay, so that was first point. Convergence on the sciences. I just confirm what John was saying, maybe with different words, okay? Then what I would add to John's presentation, because this is very technology-driven, and you talk about the capabilities from technology, and you talk a lot about people and consumer citizens of today, okay? But what I'd add to that is what's going on in biology, basic biology. I mean, the researchers in academia, in my member companies, they are now effectively rewriting the taxonomy, the definitions of disease. I mean, if you think about it, I went to pharmacy school a long time ago, and it's all changed. It's all changed. We used to diagnose people based on signs and symptoms, and now we're looking at biomarkers and looking at epigenetics and so on. And we still have, in many therapeutic areas, we still don't really have the therapeutic options to match that science. There was an op-ed recently by I think the outgoing head of the NIH Institute for Mental Health. I think he's going to Google, interestingly. I think he said in the interview that he will make, in the short term, he's going to make more progress at Google than in doing basic research. I thought that was interesting. But he said this, he wrote this op-ed where he talked about the shotgun approach in mental health. Where we do trial and error with depression, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, so mental health and neurology. We still really don't understand this part of the body yet, okay? So so there's a lot going on in biology, and this is also important to add to what's been said, is that suddenly there will be disruptive technologies. I mean, Aki mentioned cures for hepatitis C. I mean, scientifically, it's not that complicated now. It's great, fantastic, we did it, okay? But now what's going on in cancer is just amazing. We all know cancer is a genetic instability. So you have to test every patient for exactly what drugs are you going to put in, and it'll be a cocktail, okay? And that requires a whole new thinking of, how are we going to do that? Do we have the diagnostics? Do we have the pricing models? Affordability, as Aki mentioned. So I think the biology is changing big time, and there will be some very disruptive, in a good sense, innovations coming. The day we have a really effective medicine, or rather technology, for dementia, Alzheimer, and I say technology because it's probably medicine in there somewhere, but it's going to be about intercepting the disease in the population, to the point made earlier, and then it's going to be some cognition software, maybe that picks it up. It's going to be a medicine, maybe. It's going to be some biomarker imaging, it's going to be some cognition support afterwards, and the tracking. Because the payers are not going to pay for this unless they know it's working, right? So that's going to be very disruptive, So add to John's predictions about, how the technology and individuals are changing. Add to that the breakthroughs in biology. So that would be my second observation. And the third one, which I deduce from all this, is that, there's a receiving end of this. So the traditional way of looking at innovation is that there is this supply side, and then there's a demand side. I don't buy that. I think the innovation system is more circular. But there's going to be a receiving end of citizens, consumers, but then also governments and regulators and payers and systems. And they are the ones that have to get, and I guess we're all part of it, that have to prepare for this. So it's about the data, it's about the regulatory pathways, it's about the tracking, and that conversation has just started particularly with our health systems. I think in the pharma space, I think our regulatory agencies and many of the payers are aware of what's happening. And they're quite concerned about how we're going to deal with all this. All this innovation is fantastic, and how we're going to deal with it. So I think we need to have a conversation about the policy. What's the policy response to the excitement? I mean, you can go every day to a conference that gets excited about digital health, but where are the policy conclusions for it? I see a little bit of work from the European Commission on eHealth, mHealth, and so on. But there's still a lot more that has to be done. Payment models for pharma companies, payment models for gene therapy, cell therapy, all these things. How do you pay for a software? Someone develops a software for an iPhone. Maybe if the people download an app, they pay for it. But if this is in the interest of the health system and the insurers, how do you develop that? So the business models, the policies, the systems. How does society respond to innovation, whether it's technology or whether it's biology? This is something I think we really need to think about very carefully.
Richard,
thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you're bringing, again, in the equation quite a lot of open questions. When people visit my institute, especially we get a lot of politicians visiting and they say, how do we implement that? And we try to explain how you implement it technologically, and they say, no. How do we do it pragmatically in the real world? And I think that's very important. But also, the fact that science is changing, medicine is changing, life sciences are changing, is essential in the whole discussion. We have changed completely, and the convergence of sciences to new paths in evidence and discovery is something that is staggering. I do a lot of research in brain tumors for children, and for many, many years we were believing that medulloblastoma with its small variants is one disease. Then biologists came and they told us only from genetics that you might have some serious division of subgroups in medulloblastomas. And now with work we did with clinicians, people that do lab or clinical work with biomarkers, we might come to the conclusion that we have 4 or even 5 different diseases. And we might write again our WHO classification on that kind of area. So that's an example where things have changed completely. So Daisy, from your perspective.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John, for these 7 predictions. You will excuse me, but I prefer to continue in my language, Greek language, so you can use this if you want. Because I take the opportunity to express myself better in Greek. Εγώ θα μιλήσω, άκουσα με πάρα πολύ προσοχή τον Τζον Crawford και τις 7 προβλέψεις του. Είμαι εδώ σήμερα για να μιλήσω από την πλευρά μιας μεγάλης, πιστεύω, κατηγορίας χρηστών, μελλοντικών, η οποία είναι η τοπική αυτοδιοίκηση και είναι και ο φορέας που είναι αρκετά κοντά στους δημότες του, επιφορτισμένος με ένα καθήκον για την προαγωγή υγείας, που τα τελευταία χρόνια αυξάνεται όλο και περισσότερο. Είμαστε δίκτυο του Παγκόσμιου Οργανισμού Υγείας και θα μιλήσω εδώ και για τα δίκτυα όλης της Ευρώπης, που υιοθετώντας τις πολιτικές που έχει ο Παγκόσμιος Οργανισμός Υγείας για τις διάφορες πολιτικές υγείας, έχουμε μπροστά μας, την επόμενα χρόνια, να ενσωματώσουμε επίσης την πολιτική για το eHealth. Έχουμε ζητήσει στο επόμενο συνέδριο που έχουμε τα τέλη Μαρτίου του 2017, αυτή η πολιτική που πρόσφατα ο ΠΟΗ Ευρώπης έχει υιοθετήσει και που ονομάζεται From Innovation to Implementation και είναι οδηγίες προς τα κράτη-μέλη, να αναλυθεί και σε επίπεδο πόλης. Οι πόλεις έχουν υιοθετήσει και καλούμαστε να δουλέψουμε πάνω στο πώς ορίζει την υγεία ο ΠΟΗ, που είναι η ευρύτερη έννοια της υγείας, που έχει σχέση με την ποιότητα ζωής. Από τα μεγαλύτερα, πώς να το πω, έχουμε να κάνουμε, η δουλειά μας έχει να κάνει πάρα πολύ με τους παράγοντες που επηρεάζουν την υγεία και που είναι κοινωνική, οικονομική, περιβαλλοντική. Βλέπουμε λοιπόν τη χρήση των νέων τεχνολογιών σαν μια πολύ μεγάλη δυνατότητα, σαν ένα παράθυρο καινούριο στον κόσμο που μπορεί να μας βοηθήσει σε αυτό. Έχουμε ξεχωρίσει λίγο τι θα θέλαμε και τι προσδοκίες έχουμε για τα επόμενα χρόνια από τις νέες τεχνολογίες, τις οποίες, αν μου επιτρέπετε προσωπικά να πω τη δική μου άποψη, τη χρήση του ίντερνετ και των νέων τεχνολογιών τη βλέπω σαν ότι είναι αντίστοιχη με την ανακάλυψη της τυπογραφίας από τον Γουτεμβέργιο. Δηλαδή, πάρα πολλές αλλαγές θα έχουμε πάρα πολύ γρήγορα, επειδή έχουμε πλέον τη δυνατότητα η πληροφόρηση και η γνώση να φτάνει παντού. Μερικές αρχικές σκέψεις που έχουμε κάνει για το πώς για μας θα είναι χρήσιμο το eHealth στο μέλλον, μπορούμε να το κατηγοριοποιήσουμε ως εξής. Καταρχήν, εμείς έχουμε πολύ μεγάλη ανάγκη από μετρήσεις και παρακολούθηση της υγείας του πληθυσμού. Για να σχεδιάσουμε σωστά την πολιτική μας για την υγεία, χρειάζεται να ξέρουμε πάρα πολύ καλά το επίπεδο της υγείας του πληθυσμού. Έχουμε κάνει δειλά κάποια πρώτα βήματα σε αυτό και αύριο θα παρουσιαστεί και από το Εθνικό Δίκτυο Υγιών Πόλεων ένα σύστημα το οποίο εφαρμόζουμε μέσα στα κέντρα πρόληψης που δημιουργούμε τα τελευταία χρόνια, που εστιάζεται στα 7 θανάσιμα νοσήματα και θα το χρησιμοποιούν οι Δήμοι για την καταγραφή του πληθυσμού που πάσχει από αυτά, για την έγκαιρη ειδοποίησή τους στο να ξανακάνουν τις εξετάσεις τους και γενικώς στην παρακολούθηση όλου αυτού του προσυμπτωματικού ελέγχου. Μας ενδιαφέρει όμως πέρα από αυτό η μέτρηση και η παρακολούθηση της υγείας του πληθυσμού. Παραδείγματος χάρη, για μας είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό να ξέρουμε αν σε μια περιοχή έχουμε, ας πούμε, περισσότερους καρκίνους από ό,τι υπάρχουν σε άλλες περιοχές και γιατί τις έχουμε αυτούς. Σε άλλη περιοχή έχουμε τροχαία ατυχήματα περισσότερα και έχουμε θανάτους από αυτά και για να σχεδιάσουμε την πολιτική μας πρέπει να το ξέρουμε αυτό. Ο δεύτερος τομέας, στον οποίο προσδοκούμε ότι θα έχουμε βοήθεια στο μέλλον από αυτή την τεχνολογία, είναι η αγωγή υγείας. Η εκπαίδευση του πληθυσμού σε θέματα υγείας και πόσο εύκολα μπορεί να φτάνει πια η πληροφορία στον κάθε πολίτη και η εκπαίδευση των επαγγελματιών υγείας σε αυτό, αλλά και των επαγγελματιών που μπορούν να μεταφέρουν την πληροφορία υγείας. Παραδείγματος χάρη, έχουμε ένα μεγάλο πρόγραμμα που εκπαιδεύουμε τους εκπαιδευτικούς στο να δουλέψουν με τα παιδιά στο σχολείο τους για την ορθή χρήση των αντιβιωτικών. Θα ήταν πάρα πολύ πιο εύκολο και πιο ευέλικτο αν μπορούσαμε αυτή την πληροφορία, την οποία τώρα την κάνουμε σε σεμινάρια και μαζεύουμε λίγους τους δασκάλους και τους εξηγούμε, να μπορούν αυτό να το έχουν κάπως πιο αυτοματοποιημένο, ας το πω έτσι. Για πάρα πολλές πληροφορίες που θέλουμε να μεταδώσουμε, χρησιμοποιούμε ήδη το Facebook. Αλλά αυτό θα μπορούσαμε να το δούμε σε μια πιο επαγγελματική μορφή. Ας πούμε, τώρα κάνουμε το εξής. Ο Παγκόσμιος Οργανισμός Υγείας βγάζει στο Facebook μια πολιτική του, εμείς την παίρνουμε μέσα από τη δική μας ιστοσελίδα, τη δημοσιοποιούμε, αλλά πόσο πιο χρήσιμο θα ήταν αυτό να φτάσει στον κάθε πολίτη αν είχαμε μια καλύτερη μορφή σύνδεση. Επίσης, όλο αυτό το πληροφοριακό υλικό, παραδείγματος χάρη που έχουμε τώρα να δώσουμε στους δασκάλους, πόσο πιο εύκολο θα ήταν και πόσο πιο χρήσιμο να μπορούμε να τους το μεταφέρουμε πιο αυτόματα. Ο τρίτος τομέας, στον οποίο θέλουμε να εστιαστούμε, αφορά καθαρά την πρόληψη των νοσημάτων και τους προσυμπτωματικούς ελέγχους. Ο τέταρτος, το περνάω λίγο αυτό γιατί έχουμε αναφερθεί αρκετά στα ιατρικά, ο τέταρτος τομέας που μας απασχολεί πάρα πολύ είναι η κάλυψη των κοινωνικών αναγκών, η κοινωνική φροντίδα. Πιστεύουμε ότι εδώ οι νέες τεχνολογίες πάρα πολλά έχουν να μας προσφέρουν, είτε αφορά άτομα με ειδικές ανάγκες, είτε αφορά ηλικιωμένους, είτε αφορά κάθε είδους κοινωνικό πρόβλημα το οποίο μπορούμε να βοηθηθούμε στη λύση του. Ο μεγάλος τομέας που άφησα για το τέλος είναι η βιώσιμη ανάπτυξη. Όλα τα healthy cities σε όλη την Ευρώπη έχουν υιοθετήσει πλέον τους αρχές και τους στόχους του Sustainable Development. 17 στόχοι από αυτή την τεράστια πολιτική, πέρυσι το Σεπτέμβριο του 2015, εστιάζονται στον τομέα της υγείας. Σε επίπεδο κρατών λοιπόν και σε επίπεδο πόλεων έχουμε υιοθετήσει αυτούς τους 17 άξονες και έχουμε να δουλέψουμε σε αυτούς. Δεν νοείται ότι θα έχουμε υγεία αν δεν έχουμε καθαρό αέρα, δεν έχουμε καθαρό νερό, δεν έχουμε καταπολεμήσει τη φτώχεια. Είναι μερικά παραδείγματα από αυτά που σας φέρνω. Θα ήθελα λοιπόν να σκεφτείτε όλοι εσείς που παράγετε αυτή την τεχνολογία, ότι αυτός είναι ένας μεγάλος τομέας στον οποίο εμείς ενδιαφερόμαστε και με την ευρύτερη έννοια είναι η υγεία και για μας είναι eHealth. Παραδείγματος χάρη, το να μπορούμε να ξέρουμε την ποιότητα του αέρα ή να μπορούμε να το μετράμε στη βρύση μας όταν το πίνουμε, ή το νερό, ή να μπορούμε να διαβάσουμε αυτόματα τι περιέχει μια τροφή που αγοράζουμε για να φάμε, είναι τομείς οι οποίοι συμβάλλουν στην υγεία μας. Θα σταθώ μόνο σε δύο εμπόδια που θεωρώ εγώ ότι έχουμε μπροστά μας. Το ένα είναι, και το έχουμε αντιμετωπίσει και όταν φτιάξαμε και τα κέντρα πρόληψης για την υγεία, είναι και όταν προσπαθήσαμε να κάνουμε και ηλεκτρονικό ιατρικό φάκελο, είναι τα προσωπικά δεδομένα, η προστασία των προσωπικών δεδομένων. Θεωρώ ότι τα εμπόδια υπάρχουν για να τα ξεπερνάμε, όχι για να μας εμποδίζουν. Επομένως, εδώ μπορούμε να δούμε πώς μπορούμε αυτό να το ξεπεράσουμε εύκολα. Το δεύτερο εμπόδιο που πρέπει να ξεπεράσουμε γρήγορα είναι η εκπαίδευση του πληθυσμού στις νέες τεχνολογίες. Ό,τι και να σκεφτούμε, ό,τι πρόγραμμα και να φτιάξουμε, πρέπει οι χρήστες του να μπορούν να το χρησιμοποιήσουν. Επομένως, πιστεύω ότι ένας μεγάλος, είναι και κατευθυντήρια οδηγία του ΠΟΗ αυτή, ένας μεγάλος τομέας είναι η εκπαίδευση του πληθυσμού στη χρήση νέων τεχνολογιών, η εκπαίδευση των ηλικιωμένων, η εκπαίδευση των ατόμων με ειδικές ανάγκες, όλων. Επίσης, η εκπαίδευση των επαγγελματιών υγείας που έρχονται σε επαφή με αυτό τον πληθυσμό, ώστε να μπορούν να το χρησιμοποιούν. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Thank you, Daisy. I think all of us have brought the patient-centered, the people-centered, because we don't talk about disease, we talk about health and well-being. But I brought the citizen-centered, and thank you, Daisy, for bringing this up, because I think the stakeholders in this whole effort involves also society. And there is an interesting division between social support and responsibilities of governments or responsibilities of citizens in that participation and the delivery of healthcare. And even in healthcare we have fragmentation. Primary care is kind of detached to secondary care and so on and so on. So all of these are challenges. I think you brought some barriers. We'll come back to this later in our discussion, but these are quite important. Theodoros.
I would also like to thank John for his predictions. I also hope to become true. I know that John makes very good presentations, but if it is supposed that I'm representing the healthcare personnel, I would say that if the audience was full from doctors or other health-allied professionals, would find the presentation, I would say, rather futurious, or maybe wishful thinking, maybe. Okay. Let me make some comments. The medical personnel is very adaptable to changes. Bear in mind that the half of our knowledge is changed every 5 years. It's very adaptable to adopt new tools, including technology. Okay. On the other hand, more and more the medical personnel realizes that the landscape of health care and social care landscape is rapidly changing, which means that we are moving from the hospital-based episodic and acute care to outpatient care, more coordinated with strong relationships and connections with social care, as Dasy mentioned. Which means reallocation of roles, reallocation of budget, etc., etc. At the same level, more and more the personnel realizes that the game is changing, which means that from one-man show with the medical doctor in the center of the game is changing to more shared care, which means more teamwork, which means, again, reallocation of the roles and the resources. All of these, what do they mean? They mean that we must be prepared for new business models of health and social care provision, maybe for new reimbursement schemes. The fee-for-service is rather dying. There is emergence of pay for performance. Is a lot of contradictive approach of this system, but the real life has a lot of problems. So I think that if the payers are not convinced from these new approaches, I think that we are going to remain at the same level of wishful thinking. I have met Dasy, how many years, we are not going to reveal it, ago at the municipality of Athens, trying to initiate some kind of eHealth, okay? But more than 10 years have passed unsuccessfully. We have to find out the driving forces, the real driving forces for the change. You mentioned that political will is a very general term. What does it mean, political will? Okay, we can discuss
Theodoros.
further.
And I think
I don't want to be an optimistic, okay?
Yes, I think it's very important to see also clinicians that they don't see only the approach being episodic care, but you have this holistic view of things. And that's something that all our panelists have, as we come from different disciplines, from different sectors, but we see these needs. So I think you give me the opportunity for the next question, which John brought the concept of population health. And then we have the concept of big data. Yes, we have a lot of data that we need to collect and actually harness it for this kind of population health. On the other hand, we want to stratify health and personalize it. So if I take the view of Eric Topol, who is also very controversial as an innovator and as a medic, he talks about population health in the traditional point of view being not the appropriate way of doing things. It's the average effect. So in his view, we need to be very creative in destructing our current models of medicine and delivery of care. So how do you think that we need to create this new way of real-world evidence so that we can achieve proper population health that looks at populations and at groups, but also at the individual in a personalized way? So maybe we can start from whoever would like to comment. So Richard.
Yeah, no. Having worked a lot on this and met lots of people that are far more clever than I am, I've come to the conclusion that we have to very much separate the more traditional way of looking at e-health and data and big data as legacy data, meaning what we have in our systems today or what we will collect in the current systems, which very much in Europe at least is sort of old mainframe technologies, okay? Elsewhere in the world you may be able to leapfrog, okay? Because the legacy data comes with all sorts of problems, you know, with data privacy, people are not giving consent, you know, how you're going to give repeat consent, secondary consent, all this stuff. And the quality of some of this data is also not there, okay? Particularly if you start linking different databases. You know, we talk about biobanks and how you would do, you know, genome sequencing and you connect biobanks with health records, but many of these supposedly great data sets we have in Europe, we can't use them because they're simply not up to scratch from a quality perspective, you know. You can't have these error margins in the identification of the patient versus the sample. You know, you can't have these these problems we have. So I think we need to somehow look at legacy data as very interesting particularly from a research perspective. So when my companies or other researchers want to understand, they want to link the omics learnings, or the connectome, the brain mapping with disease patterns, disease history, then this is good, okay? So we have Greek health data. I come from Sweden, we have a lot of health data, okay? So that's very useful for that. But going forward, if you want to build models where you payment models, you want to pay pharma companies for performance, you want to pay doctors for performance, you want to build other tools for coordination of care and so on. I think we need to really, build on what John was predicting, is that it's really that it's patient-held, it's citizen-held generated data, which means that it's not going to be it's not going to be 100% consenting, because some people will simply not play along. I mean, this is something we have learned from the app industry and so on. They say this, don't force things on people from the beginning. You have to gamify things, you have to sort of start with something and then you nudge them along. And I'm sure that all these people I took note of this, was it the Muse and this quantified self movement, So there will be lots of people that are willing to play along if the quality is good enough. I mean, I actually stopped using the sleep cycle app because it wasn't good enough, and the heart rate monitor in this one is not good enough, at least if you're exercising, so I've stopped using that for that. So the quality has to be good, it has to be reliable, and then you can nudge people along. So I think this is what we have to think about. We have to invest in, this is the new generation of eHealth and mHealth. It's really patient or people-generated, centered, held, and people will be able to consent. So if I generate data now, I can be asked 2 years from now, do you want to donate all your data for this research project? And I can say, yes, and off it goes. So not a one for all, not a sign off forever, that all my data will be forever be given to everyone, including Google and AbbVie and Pfizer, no. But, can I be asked some time in the future to actually donate for specific things? And then there are others that are willing to just give it to anyone, because we all have different preferences in terms of privacy. That's what I think. This is how we have to deliver on population health, is by engaging the individuals and then nudge them along. Don't force things upon people.
Any other views on this? So Petra?
I'd just like to go back to one of the presentations made this morning, which is that the real challenge in all this is how can we actually reinvent our healthcare system rather than digitizing the old one? Because we're still rather caught up in the idea about let's invent a robot that replaces the district nurse, let's invent a watch that really will tell you whether you sleep properly. But we haven't actually made that real major transition yet of thinking about healthcare differently. And I think the answer to that lies in your point about understanding the role of the individual and the population as a whole. And I think once we've got our heads around that, we will actually see the really big leap forward, because at the moment we're actually just fiddling around the edges because we're trying to digitize an existing system rather than invent a new one.
Any further comments on?
No, just to say I agree that we need a new business model. I think what we're sitting with is outdated, it's in silos, it's fragmented, and I think the future is about also partnerships, transcending the traditional boundaries, and maybe part of that partnership is actually about the data, and of course putting the patient and turning this around, putting the patient in the center and building models around that. I think the second thing on the population health side, the fact of the matter is, specifically in Europe, given the aging population, the real challenges that we face are in two areas that I see going forward. The one is in oncology and cancer, and the other one is actually in Alzheimer's and dementia. I think those are real challenges, and I think we have to put a lot more effort and focus on those two areas.
To add on this, nothing to add on. We're going the right direction, and the driving force you mentioned could be the patient. That could be the one, to push the systems, to push the governments, the payers, the regulators, that this is what I want in the Western world with, the power of choice. But on the other side, we should not forget that, on globalization, we also face the immigration wave, and we have reappearance in the West and in Greece as well, infectious diseases that were extinct for 50 years or even more, and together with malaria and all that. So we have to think of, those citizens as well, that they're not literate in terms of, e-health and m-health and all that. So the system should provide for them, because they were going to migrate either we like it or not. Globalization is not, a fad for the next month. It's here to stay. So we have to also look for ways to protect these populations also.
Okay, I think you posed a very challenging question, Theo. And I think that if you put on one side population science and population health, which is based on sort of global statistics, and then on the other hand, personalized health and individual health and all the genes, etc., then you have two different opponents, as you said. I think they both, if I go back to John's presentation, they both have a hype cycle themselves. And I wonder whether they sort of resonate in any sort of point so that they can meet together. Because I think you can have inferences from both, but then find the magic way to sort of utilize both at the same time for the benefit of the individual. And that's perhaps what we call precision medicine. But I don't know how this is going to be done, but I think it's going to be in the future, ought to be done in the future, that's all.
So I think all of you bring some interesting challenges, but also a different way of thinking. We need to change the way we are providing care, and we need to change our models. So indeed, data is not complete. So the missing data problem is not a problem, it's an opportunity, as Richard mentioned. The concept of not trying to just simply take paper records and make them cards on a computer, and that's why initially electronic healthcare records were a nightmare, because they were repeating that kind of complexity we had on paper, and they were just simply trying to replicate the same workflow in a digital form, while not sitting down and redesigning again, or creating with the citizen and the people and all stakeholders the new possibilities. And of course, all the elements that you mentioned, pushing the concept of co-creation, pushing the concept of participation. And yes, it is a balance. We cannot use the old models. I think we need to start even thinking outside the box to what we mean precision medicine when we have missing data, or when the data evolves dynamically and adapts. So I think these are quite interesting elements. But I would like to bring now the most important problem, which is adoption of innovations and barriers to this adoption. And I think I would like to ask the audience, I don't know how many of you, even if in Greece, you are allowed to see your patient records, or in other parts of Europe. So how many of you have access to your patient records? Raise your hand. I have. Okay. It took me 6 months to get access to my patient record. And actually, I was always quoted in the UK that I'm not allowed to look at my patient records because it will break my privacy kind of rights. Later on, my GP told me that you're a very educated person, so having access to your patient record will make you a difficult patient. But I think the issues of privacy, the issues of adoption start becoming barriers to innovation and digital innovations. I don't want to look at individual barriers and expand on them, but maybe from each of you, or whoever would like to say, which is the most important barrier in your view in innovating in care for the future?
The easy answer to this perhaps would be the regulatory aspect or the, changing policies or whatever. But I would say that whatever the policies or the politicians are going to put as laws or as regulations are going to be one side of the whole problem. I think the solution to what you mentioned is education. I think you have to educate the health professionals, you have to educate practitioners, you have to educate clinicians, but also, as Dasy mentioned, also the public. And that's the driving force of change and the adoption of innovation, I think.
Richard Bergstrom can add more because he's been around much more than I have been, but from my perspective, looking from the pharmaceutical industry, we have 7,000 molecules in development. So the challenge for these molecules to come to market, not all of them will come to market. We know that a small portion of those molecules, they do make it to market, is to make sure that it's an outcomes-based research and innovation that we can convince authorities, payers, regulators, and of course, the public, the healthcare professionals, that these are worth to be reimbursed, and insurance companies can look at them favorably so that patients can take those medicines. So we need to put the horizon scanning of the next 5 to 10 years, what's coming, what we can afford, again, the issue of affordability that comes into play, and the industry to be able to bring innovation that we can afford.
I think that its previous success and complacency and the resistance to change, it's the old Kodak story where, in the 70s, Kodak had 70-80% global market share. They invented the Polaroid, the digital camera. They didn't want to change the business model, and events overtook them. So I think, to a very large extent, it's a complex set of, let's say, interactions between different stakeholders, including the providers, the insurers, the patients, the regulators, the hospitals, the pharma industry as well, that sometimes inhibits that need to change. So I personally think that a lot of this change will be built de novo through new structures, and having the right business model, I think it's just going to accelerate into the future.
I think the biggest thing standing between us and many of John's predictions is desire. It's not regulation. Look at Uber, look at Airbnb, look at all those other things that are going on. Uber is illegal in many countries, doesn't stop it operating. Airbnb tests the margins of a lot of law, doesn't stop it operating. We've all bought things one way or another through online services, whether it's a local service like Gumtree or whether it's a big service like Amazon. It's desirability. Because if somebody comes up with an eHealth solution that is desirable enough, that changes, that makes doctors' lives easier, that makes patients' lives easier, they will come into use. And I think actually we're seeing that happening now. The generation of doctors who are coming into hospitals now, they simply won't accept being told, you can't use your iPhone in this hospital. They won't accept it, they'll do it. They will bring their own device, regardless of whether or not the hospital has a bring your own device policy. So even though I'm a lawyer originally, I think the law is used as an excuse. The law will adapt and it will make things possible, but it's up to the engineers to come up with something that is truly desirable, and if it's truly desirable, it will fly.
I think, Petra, at this point you bring something very important. The healthcare sector is very risk-averse, and it doesn't look at that desirability. And I think it's not only the engineers, but it's the co-production of the whole set of stakeholders that bring that desirability. We are the second worst sector in adapting digital after the maritime industry, which might not be necessarily the best industry for implementing digital. So there you have it.
Yeah, if I may say, I think Petra is absolutely right that it's, we have to make these things as desirable as possible. We've seen many examples in other industries, as Petra said. The other thing I would say is that it does take a while for these adaptations to be embedded in a healthcare system, but one of the things that accelerates it is lack of money, and this is what we have in at the moment. I mean, if it comes down to do we ration care? Do we start reducing service levels? Do we lengthen waiting lists? Or do we use technology to address some of these challenges? I think that's the other thing that will help to drive it forward. I think if we were living in a very healthy economy with lots of money flying around, I think actually we'd still be rather stuck with some of the old models. And I think that this catalyst of having to make some hard choices and then deciding how do we actually make this more efficient, how do we make the skills go further, how do we really reduce demand from patients or citizens that really are overusing the system and could achieve the same results with less resources. That's an important factor too. So we should in a way welcome the lack of money as a way of getting us to think differently about how to do this.
Yes, I'll say two things. One is more technical maybe, and one is a slight philosophical detour this late in the evening. The first hurdle is, it's payment models. In the US, we have this saying, if it ain't billable, it won't be done. Okay, and you can conversely, you can say, if there's no, if you pay for it, it'll be done. So I think you'd have to use payment reform, which is the term in the US, to reinvent ourselves. Okay, so when these Alzheimer medicines will come, or Alzheimer technologies, we have to have a combination pricing for that. We're going to say we're going to pay for a result, and payers should say they should look at the private sector. There's a device company, there is a pharma company, there is some other people. You say, go figure. You figure out how to deal with this. We're going to pay this for managing this for 1 year, okay? And here and now, we can do it for cancer. I met with your health minister, Andreas Santos, today, and I said, we should have a model for paying for outcomes in cancer. We can't go on having these list prices for combination use. We have to say 1 year survival, 5 year survival. And in that area, it's actually, for some cancers, not all, but for some cancers, it's fairly easy. Dead or alive, you get the payment. And then the pharma companies can figure out how we're going to share the revenue. I mean, that's going to be a real headache, Aki, but, at least. So payment models. That's the technical part of my response. The other one, the other thing I'd like to say, and this is a slight detour, is about data, and we all talked about this, and access to data, and how we see data, and how we see health data. Okay? And I read, again, slight detour, I read a very interesting article, or it was a supplement in The Economist several years ago about the future of journalism. And there the point was made that journalism has changed fundamentally with the internet and all this and the social media sources. Because people are not looking anymore for the facts. Because the facts, the reporting is out there, So if you read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or one Politico, you want opinions. And I'm the same. I pick up the new facts on my phone, some of these other news sites where you get the rapid reporting. But when I pick up the paper, I want to read what people have, what views they have about Trump and Clinton and so on. That's what I want to read about, okay? Because I have the facts myself. Now, take that into healthcare. We don't have a model for having access to the data. We still go through intermediaries, it's medical journals that interpret and say, this is the summary, trust this. Or a regulatory agency that says, we have approved this, don't you worry, it's safe and effective. You want the data? No, why do you want the data? You don't need the data. Right? So this is it. So we need to really think about a completely new model where, because it's now, we're able to do it technologically, to share all the data, all the health data, all the data from our companies, all the data the regulators have, all the health data, and make it a common good. But you have to have standards for that. And if you don't have the standards for this, and if it's not a common good, and you don't have the standards, we're not going to have trust from the population. And this is where I think that the pharma industry, the medtech industry, the healthcare industry The Googles and all the others have to figure this out. And it cannot be that people are going to sit on proprietary data. Forget about it. Google cannot own the data, Pfizer cannot own the data. Healthcare systems cannot own the data. It has to be something which is a common good for everyone, you know. Similar to the journalism. Free flow of information, and then you have people that sit and interpret the data. And this we haven't done yet. So I think I'm arguing for some collaborative solution, big time, for health data. And anyone who has a good idea on that, please let me know. You know where to find me.
Εγώ θα ήθελα να σταθώ λίγο σε ένα σημείο που έθιξε η Πέτρα, που αφορά το σχεδιασμό των προγραμμάτων από τους μηχανικούς. Θα ήθελα λοιπόν να σκεφτούμε ποιος σχεδιάζει για ποιον και πώς εκφράζονται αυτές οι ανάγκες και φτάνουν σε αυτούς που μπορούν να σχεδιάσουν ένα πρόγραμμα. Νομίζω ότι έχουμε μεγάλη έλλειψη σε αυτό τον τομέα και θα ήθελα να δούμε λίγο περισσότερο το θέμα της συνεργασίας μεταξύ αυτών που, αυτών που έχουν ανάγκη ένα προϊόν, αυτών που θα κάνουν τη χρήση του προϊόντος και αυτών που καλούνται να σχεδιάσουν αυτό το προϊόν. Έχουμε περιοριστεί στο να είμαστε αποδέκτες περισσότερο αυτού που σκέφτονται κάποιοι άλλοι ότι μπορεί να έχουμε ανάγκη. Νομίζω ότι θα προχωρήσουμε πολύ πιο γρήγορα εάν δημιουργήσουμε αυτούς τους μηχανισμούς συνεργασίας που να μπορεί η ανάγκη να φτάσει σε αυτόν που θα τη σχεδιάσει. Πριν από ένα μήνα είχαμε ένα training course στον Παγκόσμιο Οργανισμό Υγείας και στο Τουρκού της Φιλανδίας. Και εκεί το Πανεπιστήμιο του Τουρκού συνεργάζεται μαζί με το Δήμο, το τμήμα πληροφορικής του, και σχεδιάζει προγράμματα που ζητάει ο Δήμος. Ο καθηγητής λοιπόν που ήταν υπεύθυνος για αυτό το πρόγραμμα μου έκανε πάρα πολύ εντύπωση, γιατί είπε ότι πλέον έχουμε ξεφύγει από τα smart cities, αυτοί σαν πανεπιστήμιο έχουν ξεφύγει από τα smart cities και έχουν πάει και σχεδιάζουν πια τα conscious cities. Επομένως λοιπόν τρέχουμε πάρα πολύ γρήγορα. Αλλά θα ήθελα να σταθώ σε αυτό, στο σχεδιασμό των προγραμμάτων. Ευχαριστώ.
I'm afraid that I'm going to fully agree with Petra. I liked very much the terms desirability and reinvent our health and social care system. Desirability depends on the incentives, again. That's why I mentioned that I'm afraid. We have here in Greece the effectiveness, the important effectiveness of the application of negative incentives. And this is the electronic prescription. Very few of us believed that would be a reality. The cost, the pharma cost was above 6 billions and it dropped 2 billions. Not because of the e-prescription, but in general. Okay. That's why we still saying that we must leave the crisis without modifying it into an opportunity in the real world.
Great. I think all of you are, although you're discussing the barriers, you're not simply giving me the barriers, you're giving me the hope for the future. And like John's prediction, we are all willing to change the way we are thinking, we are all willing to change our models, we are all willing to have people in the center, and we are all willing to co-produce and change for real-world needs. So rather than fitting technology or fitting policies into the problem, we need to understand the problem and design it from scratch by learning and using the technologies of the past. So I think this is probably what innovation is about, is thinking outside the box, is being able to be destructive in a creative way. Sadly, we have gone a little bit more than the hour, and I think we need to close the session. We could stay here all night and continue the discussion, but I would like to thank all our panelists for their contributions and their thoughts. I think probably we haven't given answers, we have opened more questions, and I find this very healthy in these fora. And actually these fora are not sometimes the stifling fora of the strong scientific conferences where answers are given, but open questions are brought forward. And we would like to thank again John for his contribution and his keynote and all this food for thought that was brought forward in this session. Thank you very much for attending.